questions. I don't have answers specifically, right? Always a cop-out for somebody who's giving a lecture, but at the end of the day, my job is to provide the questions, you figure out the answers, for two reasons. First reason is, I'm getting old. Which is to say, in a couple of years, I'm going to be sitting on a beach dribbling on myself. This is your world. Deal with it, right? Hugely important that I want you to consider these questions very seriously. Most of you are going to be policymakers, or you're going to be advisors to policymakers in one form or another. This stuff matters, and I would contend, one of my findings is, that nobody's thinking about this stuff, okay? The policymakers aren't, they're too busy, especially in the military world. The purchasers and the people who make the equipment aren't thinking about it, and the users aren't thinking about it at all, right? Deal with that, that's huge, right? Not so huge when you're sitting around in Charlemagne's kingdom worrying about whether or not to create a stirrup, put it on a horse, and travel to Hungary to fight, right? Big issue if in fact you talk about nuclear weapons or some of the technology that can stop hospitals in their tracks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the stakes are higher, it seems to me, okay? What's my pedagogy? Well, I tend to, as many of you know, render opinions willy-nilly. They come out of my mouth on occasion when they shouldn't, but I'm a believer in that, which is to say anybody who says that professors don't have opinions and that we don't, many of you are teachers, okay? Don't use those opinions, color our opinions at the very least, when we figure out what to say and more importantly what not to say. That's important. So I take the position that I drop it all on the table. I'm not particularly politically correct, and nothing you have to do with it particularly except consider them. You know, use them or don't use them. It's up to you, right? Why should we care? Again, my contention is that we don't get our arms around these technologies. They have potential to radically upset our assumptions, the assumptions of policymakers regarding governance generally and the role of the military specifically. Okay? Clearly, change is not a bad thing. Although, for us Luddites or us old guys, you know, change can be a problem. You know, get me a 50-year-old. I can't figure this computer out. Right? We've heard that before. Scott hears it all the time from me. I can't make a move without talking about it. But that having been said, all the technology that you guys think you know so much about is over in a year. You're going to be looking for somebody under 20 to tell you how to do this stuff. Right? And that's everything from drones to bioenhancement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So change is real, it's huge, and the stakes these days, it appears to me, are really high. Right? Something you need to consider. Right? So how do I get interested in all this? The military technology, administration, and organization has changed radically since I went in the military, which is, you know, a long time ago. Having said that, I've kind of, my career as a military individual, as a soldier, generally spans what I would call the last infantryman's war, the last war fought by a levée en masse, you know, huge, Napoleonic, French Revolution War, the last ones. That's all changed in my life. Right? Cold War, of course, was a war in a state system, general rule. Okay? I'm a user of technology. I'm an adapter of technology, and we'll talk about what an adapter of technology means. And I've been a defender of technological change. One of the things I did as an attorney was defend the military as it in the late 50s and early 60s, before I was involved in it. I was involved in interrogation techniques. Go figure, right? And one of the issues came up was, can you give LSD to a guy for 12 days in a row, and will he tell the truth? Indeed, 30 years later, and he's all cuckoo, is that our fault? Right? Well, that's technology being used by reasonable people, scientists, right, to accomplish a mission, a military mission, that has unbelievable unintended consequences. Okay? Nothing new and well-intentioned. Well-intentioned people attempting to get a particular piece of information that they need to fight the Cold War, etc., using drugs, pharmaceuticals to do it, and the unintended consequences are appalling. You know? So I've been involved in kind of all aspects of that. He went on 60 Minutes and he won his case. Because what you can do on 60 Minutes, you can't do in a court. So my background, I was, and the reason I bring this up is because I think it enhances, in a sense, why I'm interested in all this. I was an enlisted soldier to begin with. I say a draftee to begin with, when they had such things. Okay, me and Napoleon Bonaparte dealt with draftees. I was an officer for a long time, as an infantry guy, and also as an attorney in the Army. I was an operational law attorney. An operational law attorney is an attorney who works for, generally speaking, a combatant commander. Somebody's going to blow something up, put in a bumper sticker, and that commander will look to that lawyer and say, can I do this? Can I move tanks through Hungary without a treaty to go to Bosnia in 1995? Okay? Can I play, if you will, with the enemy's cyber technology? Can I do this? Can I do that? Are there treaties involved? You know, those are the kinds of things that operational lawyers look at. A lot easier now because you can get on one of these things and find out the answer. We had to know this stuff before we went in, right? And of course we didn't most of the time, and we had to kind of make it up as we went. But you try to stay within some fairly confined parameters for commanders, right? Another issue I have, Pete Springer is the guy who, Singer, excuse me, is the guy who wrote a book, Wired for War. Anybody read it? About bots, robots, okay? Pretty good book, real smart guy, Brookings Institute. Laid it out. Everybody's read it. Not everybody here, obviously, but everybody who's kind of into these issues. He laid it out in a very popular book. He made a lot of money on it, actually. Why study drones, he says, because drones are so freaking cool. He uses the word freaking. I don't know where he got that one from. Right? And as I listened to him, and I've been on a couple panels with him, I never said this out loud, but I will here. Drones piss me off. This discussion of drones, there's something about it that bothers me, right? And I was trying to figure out what it was that interested me so much. And then the first thing that comes up, obviously, again, is age. And so you have to look at, you know, what lens you're looking at things through, right? And there's something about my age and the experience that I have that tell me that drones just they're just not fair. There's no skin in the game, right? It's a problem. If I could just send these things off and not have to invest anything in the result, except perhaps some media coverage on occasion, then maybe my policy in making calculus might be skewed as a result of using drones. That kind of thing kind of bothered me as well. But the real discussion with regard to drones specifically and other military technologies is nobody that I have heard of, and I've spoken at the Pentagon, I've been on panels, I did a year's fellowship at the Naval Academy, and we worked on this stuff, and I've read a lot on it, ever asked the question, should we do this? There's a few people asking it now, okay? They always ask, can we do this? In military circles, that makes perfect sense. Because the military has essentially one overriding responsibility, and that's to maintain the security of the state that it serves. So, at the end of the day, my brother, for example, was a joint operator. Says, you know, if it saves American lives, do it. And he's a smart guy, but no problem with saying that. That's as far as he goes with regard to that discussion. Okay. That makes some sense and is consistent with military logic, but hopefully they understand that there's a good deal more to governance than merely military logic. That's kind of the point of the presentation, point of the book, etc. We never ask, should we do something? We always ask, can we do something? Right? Technology. Let's start with some definitions, okay? Military, first of all. Who are we talking about? Generally, this is within the context of the United States. Why is this within the context of the United States? Well, it doesn't have to be. But the United States certainly has the largest military, not by numbers of people, but certainly by GDP, money spent, technology involved, places that it goes involved, and I would submit experience of any military in the world forever, all right? So it's a fairly good model. Other militaries have other cultures, and because that's the case, some of the things we're going to talk about here don't really apply. So I'm dealing primarily with the American military, okay? And when I'm done reading a little bit of this, you're going to tell me who's not in the military that might be involved in all this, all right? Okay? At least for the foreseeable future, a soldier is a human being. One who enters the profession with values and ethics learned at his mother's knee during his formative years in civil society and a sense of other moral systems such as religious belief and so on. Is also capable of exhibiting what is generally accepted psychological traits of human beings, including fear, love, anger, rage, guilt, mercy, hope, faith, generosity, courage, shame, cowardice, and so on. Okay? The warrior has traditionally been enhanced by training. We're going to be talking about human enhancement a little bit. Enhanced by training and technology to accomplish the military function. Okay? Which, according to Samuel Huntington, a guy who did a lot of writing on these issues early in his career, is performed, quote, by a public bureaucratized professional expert in the management of violence and responsible for the military security of the state. There, you're military, okay? I'm going to talk a little bit about military culture in a minute, especially American military culture. But, and you go to John Keegan for British military culture. A lot of it's the same when you're talking about professionals. But who's not in that definition? United States. Management of violence on behalf of the state, in defense of the state when we are. CIA, intelligence services. Okay? So from a policy point of view, for whatever reasons over the course of the last number of years, we have taken that management of violence specifically, not completely out of Department of Defense, but we have moved a good deal of it. And there are policy reasons for that, not necessarily ethical reasons, but certainly policy reasons, having to do with transparency and secrecy, having to do with the fact that CIA guys are civilians, are not in the military, any number of other reasons. But we're talking about military guys. As a rule, those are the guys that run around in uniforms, okay? Military people specifically, who else aren't we talking about? We're not talking about private contractors, okay? Another group of guys, I tend to use the word guys here. We understand what I'm doing, okay? Thank you. In my world, it was all guys in the old days. Anyway. Not anymore. Private contractors are what? They tend to be former military people because that's where the good training, where they can get their good training, right? Benghazi, private contractors. All prior special operators in one form or another. Okay? But they're civilians. They work for a contract. And there's a whole lot of governance not happening with them that hopefully is happening at the Department of Defense. So the governance procedures that you use for individuals who are doing violence on your behalf change depending upon the status of the individual involved. Okay? Well, I'm talking primarily about military guys here, right? Who are involved, at least in part, in what's referred to as warrior culture and a whole sense of professional responsibilities, etc., that govern them. Most people don't believe this, but most privates, and certainly most sergeants, and certainly most officers, do not do things on the battlefield because somebody yelled at them and told them to do it. This has not been my experience. Okay? They do it because any number of reasons. The warrior culture is what gets them to do things. I always tell a story, and I learned this in Vietnam, but it kind of makes the point. I've made it in other classes. About a second lieutenant could be not one of the smartest people in terms of experience, okay? He is given a platoon, he or she is given a platoon to run, and in the infantry that individual is told to lead those people, okay? Which is to say, if there is a hill to take, and very often there is, right? Or a building to go around, place yourself in harm's way very quickly, who's in front? Lieutenant. It's part of the warrior culture, right? What does the lieutenant do when he stands up in front? He turns his back on his troops. What do his troops have? Guns, weapons, grenades, flares, all manner of violence. And if they don't like him, or if they're not prepared to go with him, he could die. Friendly fire, right? So you're voting, if you will, on your leadership ability that not only those guys won't hurt you, but these guys won't hurt you, right? Part of the warrior culture. Now, most of those people, most of the time, wouldn't think of killing that lieutenant out of the norm, okay? But it has happened in the past, okay, and will happen in the future. What is the warrior culture? The warrior culture and the warrior ethic, which supports it, have a number of characteristics which are relevant to the definition, according to Huntington. They recognize and react to the permanence, irrationality, weakness, and evil in human nature. They are concerned with the predominance of society over the individual and think in terms of hierarchy and division of function. Military culture is informed by the value of history. It recognizes the nation state as the highest form of political organization and concedes the likelihood there will most probably be warfare between these states in one form or another in the foreseeable future. For this reason, the issue of power and state security are paramount, and the need for a strong military is therefore self-evident, according to military culture, all right? The military, especially what the military is taught, your military is taught, is that the military is a servant of the state, and military conduct is governed by a separate set of ethical prescriptions which define it as a profession. In some, Huntington concludes, quote, the military ethic is pessimistic, collectivist, historically inclined, power-oriented, nationalistic, militaristic, pacifist, and instrumentalist in its view of the military profession. It is, in brief, realist and conservative. Okay? Notice I pointed out pacifist there. Not something we like to hear about, certainly in the post-Vietnam dialogue, which many of you haven't really listened to, but because you're too young for it, but military are all militarists, and militarists like war, right? So if there's a war, blame the military. Right? The reality is most military, most of the time, real happy to sit at home and watch somebody else handle it. No fun living in Afghanistan. Definitely wasn't any fun living in Iraq, Vietnam, Korea. Which is why today only 1% of our entire population even gets involved. Consistent with the past, the modern warrior respects actions of his peers, which reflect valor, loyalty, and adherence to the military ethic. So there's a good deal of, in terms of governance, regarding the military, there's a good deal of political correctness, peer pressure, whatever term we want to use. Soldiers want to look good to whom? Other soldiers. You see in the movies, American Sniper, all this these different movies that are out, you always hear people say, soldiers say, well, I don't really care about the politics. I'm not really interested in what's going on at home in Washington, dabba dabba do. I don't watch Fox News, I don't do this, I don't do that. I take care of my buddy. That's my job. And, well, that's what that's about. Military people, as a general rule, are involved in looking good for the people around them. Right? Military ethic. What's technology? I'm going to pass this around. Take a look. This is a piece of military technology. Okay? I want everybody to touch that thing. Hopefully it'll make a point. So what is that thing that I've handed you? Do we have any idea? Bonaparte handed it to me personally. That's called a P-38. Of course, everything in the military has got a number, a nomenclature, right? It's called a P-38. And what that does, it opens a can. Right? Yeah, we used to have in the military, we ate from cans, sea rations. Sea rations are wonderful items. You can put, assuming you're prepared to carry them around, you can go to the field for days and days and days on end and not die of the food that you're eating because it's all cans. Right? Galley, how do you get in? And one of the young cooks there was going like this, and this thing didn't work. It's a P-38. Oh, no problem. Right? Now, how did this get started? Where did this come from? Is this just something that happened? No, a bunch of civilians probably took research from a university like Rutgers, okay, and created this item and sold it to the military. Now, each branch in the military has a particular section in the logistics sections that is involved with creating new pieces of technology for their particular branch of service, which is why, and they're very parochial about it. So which is why the Marines have 2 sets of uniforms, the Army has 53 sets of uniforms. Because we got a lot more people to buy stuff, right? Logistics, one might argue, is out of control with regard to the military. But in any case, that's the system. So I have a bunch of people who create or identify a need. They can be civilian bureaucrats, they can be military guys making a career of identifying needs. And then they go to the civilian sector and say, here's my need, make it happen. And try to keep it under $30, $38 or whatever, right? That comes back and ultimately becomes an item that goes through the bureaucratic system, having been innovated, and ultimately goes to the field. Now, this is good for opening cans. What else is it good for? Which it was not designed for. Didn't notice. Right here is a little hole. You can open a beer bottle with this. Right? Hugely important to the user of this item. Once you're done with your cold spaghetti, you can drink a beer. Or 12. That's an unintended use. Right? Technology doesn't have to be dangerous. It is really any item that is adapted, or excuse me, can be innovated, adapted for a particular use, and then used. Another example of unintended consequences, adaptation is C4. Anybody know what C4 is? C4 goes boom. C4 is essentially plastic explosives. You can see them in all kinds of war games. You see them everywhere. Plastic explosive. People sticking this stuff on walls. Stuff blows up. Put a cap in it, electric cap, etc. Well, C4 goes into what's referred to as a claymore mine. Again, they're going through this process, right? Adaptation, finding a need. And the need is we need something we can carry, infantrymen, we can carry and place in front of us so that when we ambush at night, we can click it and it will blow up the enemy in an ambush, right? Because I don't remember how many little balls, steel balls are in it. When that C4 goes off, it kills a lot of people, right? Really an excellent weapon, right? Every soldier in Vietnam had one. Every infantry had one. What else is C4 good for? You could cook that spaghetti from that can like that. You take it out of it, you pry it out of your claymore mine, and then you put it down and you light a match to it, and it goes up in the flame. Put that can on top there real fast, you got hot spaghetti. This is wonderful stuff, or a cup of coffee in the morning, right? Whatever. Now, soldiers are not stupid people. They have been known to be dumb on occasion, right? Big difference. College graduate will do this in a heartbeat. Think twice about it. Ripping open this bomb, pulling out the C4, and having himself a cup of coffee. Right? Let's think twice about it. Right? Problem is, what happens to the effectiveness of that weapon after the C4 is out? Nothing. So that he'll go, and he won't want to tell anybody that he did this, especially that idiot lieutenant, right? So he will go to the field with this C4, or with this C4 less bomb, and set it up, and then if there's an ambush in a firefight, it doesn't work, because there's no C4 in it. So what you need to do, if you happen to be the idiot lieutenant, is check everybody's bomb, if you will, to make sure it's got some C4 in it. I mean, is this crazy? This is called the military, okay? Same idiocy going on in Iraq, Afghanistan, going on everywhere. Soldiers will adapt stuff to their own needs. So the guy back at the Pentagon who created a need, and all the civilians, with all that research from Rutgers-University, they created something, build the Army for millions of dollars, and now it's useless because it's been adapted for another use in the field. Okay? Technology is interesting stuff that way. At the end of the day, technology is science that is useful though. So you don't do technology in a vacuum, it's adapted to science. That's what technology is. Okay? Governance. This is pretty interesting. We spend a lot of time with governance here at TGA. I know we talk about governance all the time, globalization, governance. I want to make the point, if it hasn't been made elsewhere, that governance isn't about institutions necessarily. Governance isn't necessarily about laws. So we need to figure out what governance is about and what is good governance and what is bad governance. Because this talk is about governing military technologies, right? So here's a fairly standard definition that I put in the book. Came out of the UN, but and I was thinking of it with regard to evaluating treaties, for example, which are a methodology of governance, right? Create a treaty, creates rights and responsibilities, right? And I always make the point again with regard to how do you govern the use of violence in a piracy situation in Somalia? Right? Well, we'll have a meeting and we'll talk to him, her, the other ones, right? And we will create a standard operating procedure, and that's the way it'll work. Nobody ever invites the pirates. They never get invited. So, shock and horror, that they don't go along with the governance procedure that's created at that meeting. Okay? Stakeholders matter in governance. And again, there are some characteristics which I've highlighted for you. Governance matters. Whether we're talking about laws, or ethics, or customs, or any other methodology of government, like an autocrat just coming down and say, you will do this. Governance still has to have certain characteristics for it to work. A lot of people give a lot of orders, and a lot of those orders are not obeyed, either because people don't understand, or they don't buy in, or they're not interested for whatever reason. Right? So governance can be done a lot of ways. Law, ethics, again, we've looked at professional codes and customs. Big issue came up with regard to interrogation techniques at Guantanamo Bay and Afghanistan. And the issue was there were a number of anthropologists and certainly a number of psychologists and sociologists and various kind of professionals who were involved in the interrogation techniques. You know, they were not there doing the interrogation. They were there really with the good faith of the system that was set up, is they were there to do what? To check and make sure nobody died. To check and make sure that certain metrics were kept with regard to the way those interrogation techniques occurred, and to take notes. Right? Problem. It's an operational lawyer talking. What's the problem with taking notes? Who reads the notes? First, why do you need the notes? No, anybody who's in the medical profession, you got to take notes about everything all the time. Everybody's always taking notes, right? But secondly, when you create information, what are you doing with that information? Well, very often the interrogators got to get that information to use for the next interrogation technique. This individual folds when you mention his mother. Whatever. Well, that's now you, if you're taking the notes and you're writing it down, you are really involved in the interrogation, aren't you? Okay, even though you're not there doing anything physical, right? Or another issue was, if you take those notes and you are attempting to determine whether or not enhanced interrogation techniques work, still, the intellectually honest people who have this discussion aren't sure of the answer, in my opinion. Right? How do you figure it out? Well, the easiest way to figure it out, if you're a psychologist, would be get a bunch of people in a room, torture the hell out of them, and find out what the results are. How we do scientific work, okay? Controlled environment, okay? Really big in Nazi Germany. Huge. And frankly, psychology got a lot of good information from Dr. Mengele et al. Okay? But normally, you're not supposed to be doing investigations on human beings, right? Without their consent. And indeed, as a result of the Nuremberg trials, it was considered one of the Nuremberg principles that no testing of individuals without their consent came out of the Nuremberg, right? So, what does that mean? That means that if indeed you are involved in that, I'm taking notes, I'm comparing those notes to subject number 2, to subject number 3, to subject number 4, aren't I really testing? And the answer is yes. Or let's say another one, where I'm taking notes not of the person who's being interrogated, but rather I'm taking notes of the interrogator to see whether or not he or she is capable of doing this job without being inefficient or folding in one form or another, right? Am I testing that individual? Yeah. Not good. No consent on anybody's part, right? So what happens? Well, in the military specifically, if you are a professional, a lawyer, a doctor of any kind of a medical professional, where do you get your credentials from? The state. So the state in New Jersey will give you a credential to be a psychologist or whatever, right? A lawyer, etc. And if indeed the State Bar Association, in terms of the lawyer, for example, decides that you are in violation of the state code of ethics, they can pull your license. If they pull your license, You're not allowed to work as a soldier anymore because the criteria for being a soldier is you gotta have a state license. So now we have a situation, governance-wise, unintended consequences, where individuals, this happens specifically with regard to anthropologists and some psychologists in some states, were getting their licenses jerked by, and I won't render an opinion about whether they were right or wrong, but certainly politically active individuals at those state bar who didn't like anything the military was doing, and what can we do to hurt the military? Let's go jerk the licenses of all the people from our state. Okay? Unintended consequences. Okay? So governance has multi issues as well. It can be done again by laws, we see that. It can be done by ethics, professional codes and customs, and it can be done again top down. Okay? So what's the nature of the problem? Okay? The human race has reached, this is Harry Truman, you can see that up there. He's speaking specifically with regard to the atom bomb. I mean, you get to the point in the 45, 46, 47, 48, and when you're doing the politics of whether other people get to have it now that you've got it, when do you use it, when do you don't use it, and there was a huge discussion as to whether or not the atom bomb was indeed a viable tool for a total war. Came up a lot in the Korean. Right? So that's his way of talking about the problem. Okay? This is my way of talking about the problem, and I will read it to you because frankly I like to read it. Okay? The scope of contemporary technological innovation is both impressive and staggering. Indeed, for the average consumer of these technologies, whether on the battlefield or in daily life, the general who orders this technology, the politician who pays for it, the user whose life is changed by it, even the Luddite who rails against it, these technologies are magic. They are incomprehensible in the manner of their creation, the details of their inner workings, the sheer minutiae of their possibilities. They are like the genie out of the bottle clamoring to fulfill 3 wishes. Guess right and the world is at your fingertips. Guess wrong and there may well be catastrophe. And you have to guess quickly, for the genie is busy and has to move on. There are, of course, shamans who know the genie's rules, who created the genie, or at least discovered how to get him out of the bottle. You go to them and beg for advice regarding your wishes. What should I take from the genie? How should I use my wishes? Quickly tell me before I lose my chance. And the genie makes the choices for me. And you find that the shaman is busy with new genies and new bottles and hasn't given your choices much thought at all. He may stop to help you ponder your questions, but most probably he goes back into his tent and continues his work. You're on your own, kid. Don't screw up. If you look at the literature that you get with regard to the ethics of creating technologies, especially technologies that are dual use, technologies, even those that are made for the military specifically, and are obviously, or it's foreseeable that they will be used in violent situations, very little scientific discussion with regard to whether this is a good idea or not. Right? Nothing against the scientists, and I ain't one, that's for sure. But they're not talking about the ethics of doing this. They like to get the genie out of the bottle. That's their game. Now the question becomes, how do you use it? Should you use it? Can you? What's it for? How to adapt? They're gone. They move on to the next round of issues. Okay? So, a number of research questions in this area. These are the questions you want to be answering for yourselves and for your students down the road, okay? Our 21st century military technologies, especially in the areas of 4, nanotechnology, biotechnology, human enhancement, and cyber, and robotics, axial, in the sense that they have the ability to radically change the nature of warfare in the manner in which it's done. Are they that important, or are we merely talking about, I mean, there's been technology and technological changes forever. In my book, I kind of chronicle the history of military technology over the course of time. It's pretty fascinating stuff. I talk about the stirrup, for example. There was a papal edict at one point that said crossbows were illegal, immoral. Okay? And he had the ability at that point to both say illegal and immoral because he actually owned places where he could make it illegal. He was also speaking as the you know, for God immoral. Crossbows. No skin in the game. You stand off artillery. Right? Seem unfair, not fair. Right? Didn't get anybody very far because nobody was asking, should we do this? They were all asking, can we do this? Hey, this is good, let's do it. Lots of issues like that. Question is whether we're at an axial point, which is to say something that is really different. Then the question becomes, take a look at that process that I gave you to make the P38, right? Is there something about the way that we do this, where it's innovated, adapted, and used, it's unprecedented? Because we know that there's been innovation, adaptation, and use forever. Right? Forever. History of the bow, the composite bow, the chariot, horses, iron, etc., etc., etc. These all change the way mankind does warfare. Right? Is there something going on here that's a bit unprecedented? What is the present state of governance? What's going on? Do we have any? All's fair and all is war. Hey, it's war. We can do it. Who cares? You hear that a lot. You heard it a lot in the interrogation discussion. We hear it a lot in a lot of discussions. Kind of we're hearing it when you get in a room. I haven't seen American Sniper, but I've certainly been listening to everybody telling me about it, and I read a lot of critiques on the subject. And when it comes to me, what do you think? I have an opinion, but it's not. I've not had to see the movie. Is there any governance that goes on with regard to that? Does it exist? And the answer tends to be, when you talk to people, nah, it's war. Well, let's do anything you want in war. Terrible. War is terrible. Do what you want. Do what's necessary. Right? And are there models for future governance, the way forward? And my book gives you some options with regard to that as well. Okay? So they're kind of four inquiries. Look at the types of technologies that we've got on the battlefield, the environment in which they are created and used, the intended and unanticipated consequences, and what tools are available to regulate the innovation and use. Right? So, preliminary factual conclusions to get to the end of the speech. Okay? Innovation of emerging military technologies is democratized. This hasn't always been the case. That is available to pretty much anyone with minimal constraints. Certainly that's the case in the cyber world. The proverbial two guys in the garage, right? Every time we talk about a hacker, nobody knows whether he's your brother-in-law or somebody in a government building somewhere. Point is, when I say democratize, the state isn't the only actor with regard to innovation and creation of technology. Indeed, with regard to some of these technologies, it's not even an important actor. We find that the military, for example, goes out to whom? Civilians, to create all this technology. There's no secret laboratories for the Army to create this stuff. Right? Civilians doing this. And they are fueled by Department of Defense dollars, for sure. But it's a civilian enterprise. Doing very nicely, thank you very much. Okay? In the pharmaceutical world, it's civilian enterprise universities, but it's also the pharmaceutical companies themselves. Huge bucks involved, big business, democratized. So when you say that, what you're also saying is the government doesn't have a lot of control over this. Especially when most of the science that we're looking at is dual use, which is to say the shaman doesn't care why he creates it. It's cool. So freaking cool, right? The reality of the matter is then the adapter takes that scientific, that piece of technology and makes it into something to do violence with, which isn't a bad thing, maybe a good thing. But without some norms around it, difficult to know. Right? Innovation is best encouraged and realized in fragmented and competitive environments. Innovation flourishes best in unregulated spaces. I do a whole thing with regard to the history of Western Europe versus China, for example. China initially creates gunpowder, okay? And then it migrates across Eurasia to Europe, and Europe says, hey, this is some cool stuff. Let's take this, throw it in all these bells we have on top of these churches, throw a rock in the bottom of it, blow up the rock and see what happens, right? And indeed they come up with the concept of really good artillery by the 16th century that they can put on ships to go out and conquer the world. This does not occur to the Chinese. They do it on occasion, but frankly they don't have their society is not fragmented and competitive. Remember what Europe looks like in the 16th century. 6 zillion little principalities all fighting with each other. Any technological advance works, with that. So the competition, right? And indeed, unregulated spaces. The history of Western civilization, it can be argued, is different than other places. For example, if we look at Constantinople, if we look at, indeed, China again, if we look at a number of other civilizations, what we find is both church and state pretty much together. We look at fairly autocratic polities in terms of governance. And if the emperor in China decides he doesn't want a navy anymore to go out into the world, in the 15th century he burns the entire Chinese navy down and all the dockyards that go with it. And can get away with that. That's not happening in Europe. If the French burn their navy, the British are going to go build a bigger one, right? We like arms races here in Europe. It's our tradition in the West, right? So that's very unregulated. Both unregulated from a government point of view and also unregulated from a scientific point of view. Who's doing the science? Well, many places in the world, the science is done by government-sponsored and, more importantly, government-regulated individuals. Not true too much here in the United States. There are guys making things today in places that we can't even conceive. Right? Very unregulated. That's good for technology, but it's also kind of bad if you're in the governance business, right? So another factual conclusion: the genie is definitely out of the bottle. That is, this is all occurring in multiple spaces with minimal regulation. Innovation is occurring in a culture of technological uncertainty. This is another piece of the puzzle. Remember back to how the P-38 got created? Okay? What happens with regard to a drone, for example? Guy in the field in Iraq says, I gotta have a drone. I'm doing urban warfare here. My kids are going out, and the environment that they work in is all sharp angles. And every time they walk past an angle, they get shot. This is really dangerous. And there's nothing we can do about short of blowing the building down. And you won't let me blow the building down, so I need something else. And I need it yesterday. The drone guy says in that process, well, I got a drone for you. Frankly, it's not really, we haven't done all the tests yet. We don't know how good this thing's going to be, how bad it's going to be. We don't know if we put a bomb on it, or a grenade or whatever, whether it's going to blow us up or whether it's going to blow them up. A lot of things we don't know. We don't know about the optics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's the guy in the field say? Send it to me, I'll figure it out. I don't have time for all this crap back in Washington. Right? And that's what happens. That stuff, the normal system that is set up to do what? The system is set up so that, number one, there's time between innovation, adaptation, there's a lot of testing. You know what it's, that it indeed is efficacious, it works. And then goes to the field and it is used for its intended purpose. Anybody see Dallas Buyers Club? My movie references never work. Nice, yeah. Okay. Dallas Buyers Club was about a situation, nothing to do with the military, but had to do with the initial prescriptions with regard to AIDS, what would work, what wouldn't work, right? And the FDA cop was running around, you can't do that. And he said, what do you mean? I've got orchids I'm making here. It's good for AIDS. Stop it. Let me use it. FDA says, no, hasn't gone through the process. Right? Well, that's good because it doesn't blow up when it gets to the field. Okay? On the other hand, it's bad because it takes too long to get to the field. That's called technological uncertainty, which is to say we made it, you made it, he asked for it, she got it, she's taken all the C4 out of it because you didn't remember to put the right screws in to keep her from doing that. And next thing we know, we got this whole Megillah going on, cost $1 zillion, by the way, and doesn't do the job. Technological uncertainty. The other problem, which is a very technical one, was any piece of equipment that you make and you send it someplace, military equipment like this, civilian equipment like this too, requires maintenance. And there's different kinds of maintenance, but it requires maintenance. The maintenance is designed for the individual who's going to use the equipment. Now, if we assume for the moment that you're an 18-year-old and don't know much about maintaining a drone, then we have to design it so that you indeed can maintain it. And probably the way that we're going to do that is we're going to pull out whatever piece doesn't work, hand another piece to her, she's going to put it back in, plug, plug. We see that a lot in equipment today. You guys have kind of grown up with that, okay? We did. In the old days, we fixed it, okay? No fixing anymore, constant interchange of parts, because it's, if you will, dummied down so that she can handle it, right? That's the point, right? See it in vehicles, etc., etc. Problem is, you don't just create a piece of equipment, you got to create the maintenance system and the parts to go with it in order for the whole process to work, for it to be efficient. When things are moving that fast, get it to me yesterday, the maintenance piece doesn't work. So you may use it once, and you'll use it wrong, because there's no manuals that have been created to teach you how to use it right. And by the way, you're in the field, so you didn't get trained to use it. Okay? And when that happens, lots of things go awry, a lot of unintended consequences. A war story example, unintended consequences. Infantry, Vietnam, handed me, because I was responsible, 6 sawed-off shotguns, really cool, right? And they've got 6 to 10 rounds in them with balls. We're in a reconnaissance platoon, we're in a village, and the idea is we're going to go on ambush and we're going to use these really cool shotguns, and it's going to be great, right? We get in the ambush, people show up, fire off the ambush, guns are going like crazy. What does a shotgun do that an M16? What doesn't a shotgun have that an M16 has? A flash suppressor. What's a flash suppressor? A flash suppressor is a thing on the front of a weapon that kind of keeps the light from showing where you are. Shotguns say, here I am, shoot me. In the middle of this ambush, get surrounded by 30, 40 people, there's 6 of us can't use the shotguns, don't have any other weapons. We had 45s and a lot of grenades, thank God, but that was about it. That's an unintended consequence. That's lack of training in the cycle. Okay? That's technological uncertainty. Okay? And that's occurring with drones, it's occurring with all the other types of technologies that we're working here in the 20s. And that's lousy governance, isn't it? I should have known better. Okay? Really lousy governance, but I was one of the idiot lieutenants. Okay? Didn't know. This is cool. Another preliminary factual conclusion. Military technologies will continue to emerge with or without restraint. Their unanticipated consequences are a matter of fact, okay? This is happening. It's happening today. Because the need is there. There's nothing you want to do to somebody in the field. There's nothing worse to say to somebody in the field, you can't have this because the bureaucracy says it's not ready for you. And he's about to get shot. So there's a lot of emotion involved in this discussion. On the other hand, maybe you shouldn't have it because it could hurt. Right? So those are my preliminary factual conclusions. So let's talk about what are emerging technologies. Nanoscience, very quickly. I deal with 4 or 5. Nanoscience is really interesting, and I say this as a non-scientist, so let's not ask me any heavy questions about nanoscience. I don't know. Right? I'll give you an example, though. It's the ability to take very, well, not very, very large things, to take things of any kind and make them unbelievably small. So, if you apply nanoscience to, gee, I want to get in your head and find out what you're thinking right now, and I'd like to do that by checking out how the neurons are working. It's all the science I have here, right, with this explanation. Well, I'll send a nanobot, robot, up through your nose, and they can check it out. Take a picture of it. That's not possible. Robots, it is possible. Right? And we'll become more, and you're going to have to deal with that. That's what's being tested right now. The idea that we can swarm nanorobots, really well, and we're talking to the point where they can get in your bloodstream. Right? This is very small stuff, nanotechnology, and accomplish all manner of ideas. Right? You want to know the kinds of things they will do? Where do you go to find out? Scientists going to tell you? Probably not. Right? The policymakers, they're not real interested. They got their own need, one, and they want it fixed. Go to the science fiction writers. They're the guys who think about the ramifications of this stuff. Whenever I go to one of these conferences about robots or whatever, the science fiction guys are there. They talk to you about what it could be, what the future looks like, anticipated and unanticipated consequences, and they also talk to you about ethics. They're the only guys talking about ethics, science fiction writers. Asimov, iRobot guys. Right? This is hugely important. Fabrication, and you can, one of the examples that comes up for me is the ability, and this is, DARPA thinks this is going to happen next maybe 10 years, but again, everything's moving faster and faster and faster, could be earlier, the ability to take this computer, put it in a copier, and send not this computer, but have a computer created at the other end. I saw something on TV the other day where they indeed had taken the imagery with regard to a guy's heart, and they had sent all the pictures, CAT scans, etc., threw it in this machine, and out the other end was created in plastic a complete model of this guy's heart. In fact, quite a fax machine. Right? That's nanotechnology writ small, according to what they're talking about. So, what are the ramifications? Millions of ramifications, not the least of which we don't need to send anybody to war anymore. We'll just, you put one corporal in the other end with the fax machine, and trucks are coming through, weapons are coming through, all the equipment you need to fight the war is coming through the fax machine. Right? Big deal in the military, because generally speaking, logistics are a vulnerability. One of the reasons we're really good at what we do in the field is because we're really good at logistics. We can move 500,000 people to Kuwait in 1990. Nobody thought it could happen. Who did it? Well, don't have to do it anymore. Just send Corporal so-and-so with a bunch of fax machines. This stuff is small, okay? Is that crazy? No. Okay? So nanotechnology is huge. They don't presume to understand it other than to say anything you could think of, they already thought of, right? And more, right? We're talking artificial skin. We see a lot of this being used, for example, in the burn units in various places. It's been very helpful. But it has ramifications that we haven't considered as well, right? Human enhancement. Now, we've been enhancing humans, as I pointed out earlier, forever. Right? You bring me in as a basic trainee and I can run an 8-minute mile, and you get me down to a 6-minute mile, I can still smoke cigarettes and run a 6-minute mile. You enhance the hell out of me, right? That's a good thing, right? You get me to the point psychologically where I can go sit in the rain for 3 days and not complain or walk away. That's enhancement. Call it trading, call it discipline. That's enhancement. You've made me do something the average guy won't do or can't do. Okay? As DARPA, Defense Agency. This is on top of the P-38. And you were going to ask me some questions, too.
I left my question.
Okay.
It's a 2x2 table.
All right. Peace, brother. Okay. On top of that, that innovation, if you will, chain of command, is an organization referred to as DARPA. DARPA is an organization that has a lot of money, and they could care less about your need. They're looking 30, 40 years out. So they will hire one of you PhD guys to go figure out something that might be useful in 30 years. Now, the Marines and the Army and the Air Force level won't invest in that because they need it in a foreseeably short period of time. So there's no money there. But DARPA, if they can grab you, they will invest in it. They take huge credit, and I think they're right, as far as I understand, for the internet, for example. Just to say they didn't create it, there's 30 guys in a room someplace creating the internet. They went out, paid for the technology. Nobody knew what they use the internet for. We had a clue. Internet. We got fax machines. What do we need an internet for? Who knew? They think far enough out. They were going to use it for defense purposes. Obviously, everybody could talk to each other, right? Obviously, it went a lot farther than that. Clearly, dual use. Right? Some of the things the life sciences to make the individual warfighter stronger, more alert, more endurant, and better able to heal. Well, that's stuff that modern medicine's been doing for years. That's not particularly axial, except in the manner in which they do it. A couple examples: brain plasticity, which changes the function of the human brain, right? Either by training or the application of pharmaceuticals. A lot of pharmaceuticals are used for purposes of changing the way we think. Back to the LSD example. I saw a documentary, if you will, at one of these conferences, where an individual who was a quadriplegic, they drilled into his head and they put in posts. And then they hooked those posts to his brain, and then they hooked those posts up to a computer. Now he could play chess with people in Boston. His entire world opened to him because of that connectivity between the brain and the computer, okay? And that's kind of easy stuff. Right? Problems are with regard to human enhancement. What is it about humankind that needs improvement? That's a philosophical question, isn't it? That's a pretty heavy question. Why do we need to have men and women who can run 2-minute miles? What's wrong with 4-minute miles? Right? The next big question is who gets to decide? Who gets enhanced? We have this issue in the military press with regard to pharmaceuticals specifically. Special operators get all these bells and whistles, all this really cool equipment. Special rules apply to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and the other guys don't. They're generally referred to cynically as the guys who take the bullets, the other guys, the infantry. Special guys get all the special stuff, right? Who made that decision? If I decide that I'm going to give you a medication that's going to keep you up for a week, and then I'll take you off and let you sleep a little bit, and I give it to you again, and we do that for a 4-month deployment, and then I bring you out of the military, what happens to you when you go home? It'll be a little cuckoo. Unintended consequences. And do I care? Right? Do I care? And by the way, how do you feel that now you can't stay up for 5 days anymore? Let's say you're really a great athlete in the military because I've enhanced the hell out of you in one form or another. And now you're home and you can't run those miles anymore. You're not that person anymore. You're someone else. Because of human enhancement, who decides, okay? And then again, who gets enhanced, for how long? How do we measure this? How do we do this? Robotics, let's go back to robotics. Okay, a couple things about robotics. I'm running out of time here, I will move on. Right? Robotics are nothing more than a machine. A lot of machines in the world. There's probably 50 machines in this room right now. Okay? It's a machine. It has essentially, a robot has three characteristics. Okay? The ability to gather information, generally referred to as optics. Okay? The ability to process the information, processors, which is to figure out what it saw. And then an effector, which is the ability to do something about it. So if you take a robot as a drone and you put some sort of a rocket on it, and then that robot observes the condition, processes it and says, this is one that we ought to blow up, and then effects that by unleashing that round, right? Three different processes, if you will, right? Now, presently, robots have what's called humans in the loop, which is to say, before that robot gets to let the bomb go, there's got to be some humans saying yes or no, humans in the loop. Of course, what are humans? Are humans as fast as robots? As efficient as robots? As smart as robots? Meaning the processor piece? No. So if you want something that's really, really, really fast, and you want something that isn't tired, isn't worried about his girlfriend, boyfriend, isn't worried about all the other things, the human frailties that humans have, let the processor figure it out. That's where we're going. There will not be humans in the loop. What we will do is create a processor that has what's called artificial intelligence. Once the processor has artificial intelligence, you don't need a human anymore. That's next. Right? There's even a movie about it. If there's a movie about it, it must be true. Artificial intelligence, AI, right? Okay? The really interesting thing about robotics is not even that, because that's here. Right? Is that robots can, and presently do, fabricate themselves. Robots aren't made by humans, they're made by other robots. Whoa! This is getting out of hand. Okay? And to the point where that artificial intelligence is able to indeed create other robots and create the processors, which is the decision-making piece of the robot. Now you've got a governance issue, to say the least. Okay? Scott, we were talking about governance presently with regard to targeting using drones in Afghanistan, right? Tell us a little bit about that. Who's involved, who the players are, etc.
The way the process worked last year, I'm sure it's gotten more formulaic over time, but it's pretty cut and dried system now where the colonel, which is just south of God when it comes to terms of military hierarchy, cannot make the call. You'll have the target.
And the call is?
Whether or not to launch or not launch
from a drone.
From a drone, a Hellfire missile. So we'll have it on video. It'll be up on a screen just like we're looking at the PowerPoint right now. You'll see the person, for example, on a motorbike. You'll have people talking about how far that person is from other people. But the colonel can't make the call. He's on the phone to some general, describing to the general what's going on. The general may give the approval or may not, for whatever reason the general may have.
And he doesn't necessarily have it on the screen.
Yeah, he may be in a conference.
So the decision guy is making the call without the same information that the colonel has.
Exactly, and it's right in front of him. And so, but once that call is made, two rows in front of the colonel. So
that for political reasons. And politics is the methodology of governance as well, isn't it? Political correctness can be useful. Political correctness during Vietnam was eventually, finally, we got to the point where the American public was sick of seeing body bags of American soldiers. That being the case, that governed the methods that were used by the military to do out, right? That body bag governance procedure, if you will, certainly has applied in these two wars. We have less than 10,000 people dead in both wars over the course of a 12-year period. It's pretty amazing given all the violence that's occurred. That's been governed that way. Politics has done that. Double-edged sword. On the one hand, a lot less people get killed. Certainly Americans get less people get killed. That's good. On the other hand, you never end the war. Nobody's trying to win. They're just trying to not get killed. Some would argue, Colin Powell made this point at some point, when you go to war, go with everything you got, blow the hell out of everything, and win it fast. Less people will die in the long run. That is the ethical approach to take. Now, I'm not saying that's absolutely the case. Consider that, right? Versus this kind of half-war, half-peace political governance idea, where it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's specifically bad for the civilians involved. Right? So that's robots. When I was talking to people years ago about Iraq specifically, a young fellow who was a captain, long way from captain to colonel, okay? Captain says, that's what I used to do. I was in charge of pushing the button in Iraq. Not pushing the button, I'd probably do that too. Deciding that the button needed to be pushed. Okay? So the political governance has grown, but it's still kind of a, well, it's definitely an inefficient system, one can say. Maybe the best system around, but certainly has its flaws, all right? Cyber technologies. Now, there's too many people in this room under 50, so I'm not going to tell you too much about cyber technologies. I'm barely making this thing work, right? So far, I'm doing pretty good. I'm happy with myself. Essentially, there's a number of issues with regard to cyber technologies. The first one is what are we talking about? We're essentially talking about three different pieces. Scott's the expert, he'll tell me whether I'm wrong. But essentially you're talking about the equipment itself, the infrastructure. Okay? And that can be anything from the screens, etc., that are used, radios in the field, all manner of equipment. Right? So if I can get a nano robot to create some sort of a virus in these equipment, the equipment goes. Right? Second vulnerability, if you will, is the information itself. So all this is kept. We all know about hackers. We all know about information, social security numbers, etc., being stolen and used, etc., etc. Well, in a military environment, we're concerned with, I report to you that there are 3 people on the battlefield. Let's go get them. And it turns out there are 100 people on the battlefield because somebody played with the information. So now I don't trust the information. So now I really have no communication. You call me up and tell me something, I don't believe it. Because the information I know is susceptible to being fooled with, right? So that's number 2. Okay. Number 3 is the network itself, which is to say, as I say, DARPA created this to create networks so that we could talk to people in the Pacific, so that when a naval ship, for example, is in the China Sea, and the Chinese decide the North Koreans decide they want to do something, we all hear about it fast, and decisions can be made. The colonel could talk to the general. That's a network that happens. So those 3 vulnerabilities, and if you will add a 4th, which is the entire civilian world is hooked up with the system now. And if you look at the national security strategy, which came out on the 6th, President Obama is defining, and I think rightfully so, a lot of things that were never considered security issues before. In other words, a lot of things that used to be domestic issues are now considered security issues. Education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of those is the ability of my hospitals to operate. The ability to light go on at Rutgers-University, et cetera, et cetera. So we know the civilian world, our entire economy, et cetera, is hooked up, unregulated. You can kill the United States just as easily by knocking the stock market down as you can by taking out a battleship in the China Sea. In fact, worse. huge critique with regard to whether or not we're capable of doing anything about this, defending against it, etc. There are multiple ethical issues that are involved. One of them is, if indeed you attack, well, let's say my hospitals. Attack, meaning you turn off all the electricity, turn off all the machines, turn off the doors so you can't get in and out. Made those hospitals inefficient. People are dying. Is that an act of war? And if it is an act of war, am I required to only go to your hospitals and destroy them? Or can I indeed take my bombers and go blow up your capital? No requirement that we do tit for tat in the law of war. Hasn't been answered yet. We talked about the culture of innovation, modernity, etc. Just a couple issues with regard to unanticipated consequences for the military. What does it mean to be a warrior? Again, if I am an enhanced person, does that mean that I am different from the other soldiers in my military? And indeed, that changes the culture radically. Am I, when I'm wounded and I go to the VA or whatever, and I am given prosthetic devices that indeed permit me to run faster than I used to run, can I still be a warrior? It's a big issue at the Olympics. Prosthetic devices available. Can you join the Olympics, compete in the Olympics with prosthetic devices? Am I still human? Does it mean to be human? Right? What does it mean to be a civilian? Given not only the globalized nature of the world, but the military in general, the example that I use is Scott's out in Arizona someplace and he's running a Predator in Afghanistan, right? He's a pilot. Now, yeah, you could probably blow him up. He wears a uniform every day. He's getting paid by the Department of Defense, and he's certainly projecting violence on behalf of the United States. Falls within traditional categories, even though he's going home tonight to the soccer game. Can his secretary be targeted? Is she a civilian still, paid? Or does that person become part of that kill train, if you will, and can that person be targeted as well under the rules of the law? Because the way technology works, she's really in it, isn't she? She creates the list every day, and that list is the list that he uses to blow people up. Now, she's a civilian. What does that mean? It means she didn't sign up for any of this get targeted stuff. When the day comes when you know, certain people get to go to the bunker and hide and everybody else gets blown up, she get in the door or not? Probably not. Only a secretary then. Real important to his work during the day, not, you're a civilian. Okay? Can she quit? Can she go AWOL? Absent without leave? What's her status? And I submit to you that these technologies have changed a lot of that. Okay? And again, the concept of consensual risk, how does that work in the future? I kind of talked about that already. Right? I've talked about the intersection of military and civilian professional standards. And again, this dependency on cyber technology, I think it's clear for everyone, and we're not close to figuring this out. We've done what is governance. So, my conclusion. There appears to be a good deal more afoot than merely the introduction of the next big thing. Human enhancement through the use of biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, robotics, cyber technologies has the ability to turn in their head the assumptions upon which traditional restraints are based. For the military, this is the big deal. Because the military, it's not an intellectual discussion. Human agency most likely to project violence with intended and unintended consequences. Stakes are high. Remember, the military has a responsibility to look to the safety of soldiers. So I'm a commander. Can I send all this junk that you created and he didn't look at and you ordered? Can I send that to the field? Can I make a soldier use it? And if I do, am I unethical? Have I violated the warrior code? Is my responsibility to take care of soldiers? Huge issue came up during the Gulf War with regard to the vaccine for anthrax. The Air Force specifically, but the Army as well, was given this vaccine. I don't think vaccine's the right word, but in any case, the pill, right? And the troops got to look at it, this and going, I'm not taking that. This crap can kill you. And they got on the internet, which was just kind of, which empowered them. The commander said, you have to take it, I give you a direct order to take it. You have a responsibility, according to warrior ethic, to be deployable. You can't be deployable unless you take this vaccine, because Saddam Hussein has anthrax and he's liable to use it on you. And they got on the internet, they looked around, and they found the only place making this vaccine was one particular factory, and indeed they made vaccine with regard to anthrax that would, I may have it backwards, that touched you as opposed to anthrax that you got through the air, respiratory. They made the wrong kind. So the government was giving the vaccine that they had to the kids. And indeed there were a number of instances where guys became paraplegics as a result of taking this stuff. Troops said, no, I refuse. Now they're not deployable. Now you have it's a mutiny. Right? That's based upon the fact that not only the colonels know, if you will, but the captains and the privates know now. Everybody is in power as a result of the technology. Hierarchies don't work that way. Right? Commanders have a responsibility to take care of soldiers. If I give you that vaccine, am I doing the right thing? Right? And again, military discussion is a subset, really important one, of the discussion which must occur at the national and international level. It appears that little has been done in regard to this to date. Failure will not stop the use of these technologies. We're going to use them because that user needs them. And there's real benefits most of the time, but not all the time, right? And there's the last thought. So I still trust those electronic voting machines. What I didn't cover was the governance procedures that presently exist. Certainly we have law of war, tends to work a lot of the time with regard to use, as long as the commander is in the loop, as long as that colonel has to think about that and is talking to a lawyer, right? We have the governance procedures with regard to ethics. But again, I suspect that they are changing. There's an excellent book by Michael Gross that deals with asymmetric warfare and the idea that maybe the law of war is inapplicable to ISIL, inapplicable to various individuals who indeed could care less about the law of war, which is bottomed at the end of the day on mutual respect. Okay? There's the authority chains, and we know that everything is becoming more democratized. We know that nation states are not primarily responsible or in control of these technologies. That's a problem in terms of governance. And there are a number of other treaties, essentially, that I laid out that talk about specific technologies, Cold War technologies primarily, SALT treaties and those kinds of things. And they have little bits of information that are useful, but one has to consider whether or not from an ethical point of view, they're very helpful at all. So again, still trust those electronic voting machines? Okay, that's all I have.